What is going on, guys? I am the baddest, and welcome to 2024's Indie Horror Game Awards, or as I'm more amply calling it, the best and worst of indie horror for 2024. We did this last year. Basically, I just have a list of different categories, and I'm going to be talking about a bunch of different indie horror games that came out this year, and talking about which ones I think did the best in these different categories. Although that is entirely based on my personal opinion, I did run a poll amongst you guys to determine your best and worst indie horror game of the year, so there is some of your guys' voices actually being heard in this list as well. I added and removed some categories from last year's Indie Horror Game Awards, but this will essentially be the same, and it's going to be pretty long, so I would like to get right on into it. Firstly, I'd like to talk about what I think the best demo of an indie horror game was this year. These are demos that got me excited for their full releases, hopefully coming out next year. And yeah, these are the three that I think stood out to me the most. In third place, I feel the need to give a shout out to The Joy of Creation, part of the Fazbear Fanverse initiative. This game has incredible graphics. This game looks absolutely beautiful. It is also very scary. This is, like, outstandingly scary for a Five Nights at Freddy's title. And it's also really replayable. It has fun, replayable, old-school gameplay, much like the original Joy of Creation, or story mode, I mean. And, yeah, and we don't get that much old-school FNAF gameplay anymore with the Steel Wool titles and stuff like that. So yeah, it feels both nostalgic and fresh. Really cool title that I'm looking forward to. Secondly, I have Mother Hub, which is a first-person shooter, horror game, survival horror kind of deal. I made a little video about this game this year as well. This game has cool, vibrant, stunning environments, and also really cool and creepy zombie designs, and the FPS mechanics are just really fun to play. This demo is fun and replayable. I'm so excited to get a full version of this game. But in first place for the best demo of the year, I do have Don't Fret. Don't Fret really surprised me as a mascot horror title. Just the idea of a music-themed mascot horror game is really exciting to me, and something that also just appeals to me personally as a lover of both indie horror games and music. This game has a beautiful and distinct aesthetic. The puzzles work themselves into the environment very nicely, and some of the scares in this game are actually very tactful and do come across as very surprising. Don't Fret was a demo I really enjoyed, and I'm really excited for the full release, and it is my favorite demo that I played throughout 2024. But next up, I want to talk about the best fan game that came out this year. This year wasn't too big for fan games, but there were some that stood out to me. In third place, I have Welcome to Fredbear's Remake. This game has some pretty fun and unique mechanics, and it also has some really impressive visuals. Like, some of the animations in this game are genuinely outstanding. But what I love about this game is how it's divided into two different sections, and both sections are actually pretty enjoyable to play. It's very classic, old-school FNAF gameplay kind of deal, which means you do get used to it pretty quickly, but it's actually still pretty exhilarating throughout the whole runtime. I had a pretty fun time with this fan game. Next up, I have FNAF Too Many Nights. This is just such a creative idea. It's a roguelike FNAF game where every night you add in new additions to the cast of characters that you're combating, and they all have such an incredible amount and variety and quality of mechanics. It's really fun, and it's really worth coming back to and replaying because there's just so much content and so many different things that you can do. I also really like the way this game looks. It's really cute and really silly. I just love the little drawn visuals. I don't know, there's something charming about it. But in first place, I very handedly have Five Nights to Remember. This is another remake of an old-school FNAF fan game by Radiance. This game has incredibly fun mechanics. It manages to combine a bunch of old-school FNAF mechanics and make them so much better than they've ever been before. It has a very good use of using the doors, the music box, and the cameras. And the cast of characters is great. They're all such fun and distinct revisions of the original FNAF characters. And there's enough content in this game for it to be replayable and continuously interesting. There's like a night of the original game that this is based on. There's a bunch of unlockables in the custom night, and there is a custom night which you can keep coming back to and having like different challenges with. And also the conclusion to the main Five Nights of this game is so cool. Basically throughout the whole game, there's every single like core FNAF character in there, but then it eventually just turns into different versions of Golden Freddy, kind of like Flumpty Night in One Night of Flumpty's 3. I just love this fan game. It's become one of my favorites. It's so charming. It feels old school and new school at the same time. I absolutely adore it. But next up, moving on from demos and fan-made work, I want to talk about the best OST to appear in an indie horror game. In third place, I have Shipwreck 64. This game has such cute and authentic music recreating the sound of the N64 era. The music actually contributes a lot to the atmosphere because a lot of it sounds like the dead noise of an old and kind of unfinished N64 game. But there's also a lot of creepy music that contributes to the atmosphere, and the sampling in the chase sequences is so distinct and iconic. The use of the song Duck and Cover whenever an enemy is chasing you, absolutely brilliant and something that I can't get out of my head. But in second place, I have Finding Frankie. Finding Frankie has such fun and colorful music suiting its parkour aesthetic and concept. But it also has more exciting and grungy themes for the chase sequences that suit the game extremely well. And man, the music in the final sequence that's so dubsteppy and hard-hitting, just such an absolute banger. But at number 1 for Best OST, I have Indigo Park Chapter 1. Every track in this game is so memorable and unique, and every track contributes so well to the fun aesthetic of a theme park. The chase sequence is a banger, the little area where you look at all the things you've collected is such a banger, and just the atmosphere of this game is so beautiful and charming. And the closing song of this game, Rambly Review, is just so adorable and shows off so much of this game's personality. So much of this game's personality comes from its animations and characters, etc., but it also comes from the music. So much of this game's identity to me relies on its charming and memorable music. Next up, instead of focusing on sounds, I want to talk about the best art direction I've seen in an indie horror game this year. Coming in at third place, I have Mouthwashing. This game has such a creative and unique aesthetic. It's so charming, but it's also disgusting and dark, which makes this dark and gritty tale that much more immersive and, eerie to follow. This game looks fantastic, and also I'm just a sucker for low-poly graphics, and this game looks absolutely fantastic. Following that, I have Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. It's amazing that a FNAF game looks this visually distinct and this fantastic. This game has shockingly beautiful pixel art. Every single fraction, every single fragment of this game looks absolutely stunning. And the animation work in this game, the fact that every pixel art animation is so fluid and perfect, makes this game just so much more incredible to experience. It's so pleasant to look at. Absolutely one-of-a-kind and outstanding game. But coming in at first place, I do have Kinetopet. This game has such a stunning variety in graphical styles. This game manages to execute so many different horrific recreations of the technology of the era in such a fascinating way. Again, there's just such a wide variety in the art in this game. You have, the recreations of the tech of the early 2000s. You have moments like when Kinetopet is lurking in someone's bedroom in that weird, creepy little cutscene. And you just have a bunch of different artwork in this game to make this feel like a full-blown experience. It's such a stunning game, and yeah, the visuals of this game absolutely are what make it so terrifying and so intriguing to experience. And following that, I would like to discuss the best storytelling in an indie horror game. Coming in at third place, I have Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. The VHS tapes have really good voice acting that explore side characters and different, pieces of the story in a really fun and engaging way. And the lore that's revealed throughout this game surrounding Playtime Co. and Playcare is gritty, it's dark, and it's interesting. And the presentation of the Hour of Joy at the end of the game is so cool with fantastic music paired with it. I honestly could have given this game a OST nomination just for that one track. It is absolutely stunning. The pieces of the Poppy Playtime story that we got in Chapter 3 are the best we've gotten so far, and it makes me all the more excited for the future of the game. Coming in at second place, though, I have Mouthwashing. I think the thing I appreciate about Mouthwashing the absolute most is that the character dialogue is extremely realistic. All of the characters in this game very much feel like real, grounded human beings, and it makes the dark story that this game tells all that much more riveting. The structure of this game also makes the game more riveting, because it showcases a terrifying series of events in a much more engaging and creative way. And I think putting the player in the perspective of a realistic antagonist is a very unique decision and makes the game all the more unsettling because it makes you feel gross as you experience this gross tale. Very stunning game with a very dark and unsettling story, a very upsetting story that honestly was told pretty brilliantly. But in first place for best storytelling, I do have Shipwreck 64. The ARG of this game just tells such a fascinating story of a corrupt business, hurt and hurtful characters, and a grueling development cycle of Shipwrecked. It's such a fascinating, terrifying, and honestly, strangely realistic and grounded story that I just can't get enough of. I'm so excited for what the future of Shipwrecked will be, and yeah, the story this game tells very much had me enticed throughout the whole game. And now, a new category for the Indie Horror Game Awards. I want to talk about the most replayable game this year. These are games that you can just keep coming back to, and games that have a lot of content that make it worth coming back to over and over again. At number 3, I do personally have Shipwreck 64. There's just so much content to the game that it essentially guarantees multiple playthroughs. This is a game you kind of have no choice but to keep coming back to if you want to see everything it has to offer. It's also just exciting to revisit the game and relive the thrill. This game is such a shocking and strange masterpiece that it's honestly worth coming back to over and over again to just get the feeling that it gives you back. And I personally just love playing the game. The N64 gameplay is so authentic and nostalgic, and it's just so fun to play and fuck around with and just kind of do whatever you want in the game, get whatever ending you want, solve whatever puzzles you want. It's almost like a sandbox once you've played the game enough, and it's just fun to come around and do whatever you want in the game. But in second place, I have Content Warning. This game is such a unique take on a multiplayer horror game, and its focus on being a comedic YouTuber-themed concept is genius, for one, but also so incredibly entertaining. This game is very fun to play with friends, and it guarantees unique and funny moments every single time you reopen the game. It's fun to jump into and play around with, it's fun to just travel around these randomly generated areas and come across such a wide variety of strange monster designs, and do the funniest thing you can think of in order to get the most views in your hit YouTube video. It's such a smart idea, it's such a fun idea, and I absolutely love this game. But at number 1, I have Crow Country. Crow Country is an old-school style survival horror game that has so many fun and cool mechanics, and it's so nostalgic and fun to play. Exploring the diverse environment is thrilling, with many secrets and pieces of lore to be found. And much like most survival horror games, there's a variety in difficulties and challenges that make the game much more fun and worth revisiting after full playthroughs. This is a game you can't really get enough of once you've picked it up, and it's honestly a masterpiece of an indie horror game that didn't get nearly enough attention this year. But after that, let's talk about the scariest indie horror game. In third place, a bit of a sleeper entry, I have Slaughter Me Street 1999. This remake/reimagining of the old school 1, 2, 3 Slaughter Me Street games is shockingly scary and really fun to play. Just walking around these dark environments with these weird and low-poly monsters lurking in the shadows is actually really riveting, and every time a monster notices you or starts running towards you, it genuinely induces a feeling of panic. I highly recommend you guys check this game out. It's cheap, and it's fun, and it's the best entry in the Slaughter Me Street series to date. It'll also probably feel pretty nostalgic for some of you that didn't know Slaughter Me Street was still making games. And at number 2, I have Shipwrecked 64. I've already said a lot, I've already glazed this game quite a bit so far, but yeah, this game just has terrifying chase sequences, terrifying atmosphere, and the puzzles are in places where you're always in danger. You're basically always in danger later into this game, so it is just constantly terrifying, and there's constant scares and weird sound effects, and this game really fucks with my head. But what fucks with my head significantly more is our number 1 spot, Kanito Pet. Just the guttural fear of having your address pulled up or your camera repeatedly opened is enough for this game to be one of the scariest things I've played in ages. The shock of what this game is capable of is genuinely terrifying. It's also incredibly well made, as I've said, with very high quality and authentic graphics, and yeah, just overall, incredibly well made game that makes it incredibly scary. Following that, I would like to discuss the most underrated indie horror games of the year. These are games that I think were pretty outstanding in their own right and really fun to play or really scary, etc., but just didn't get that much attention this year, which is a damn shame, so I'm here to talk about them. In third place, I have a game called False Dream. This is one of those I'm on observation duty type games where you have to spot the difference in this one location, and it is, in my opinion, the best I'm on observation duty type game on the market. There is such a stunning variety and amount of possible anomalies that makes the game so fun to replay and experience. There is just endless amounts of content, it feels like. There's also this little character that looks like Pablo from the Backyardigans, and he's so baby, and I really love him. In second place, I have blank_01. I made a whole video about this game. This game is very fascinating and very introspective, has a lot to chew on. It's a very abstract and weird kind of game that doesn't have a straightforward narrative. It kind of leaves it open for interpretation, and I think that's what makes it so great. There's so much you can think about and so much you can take away from this one short and simple game. Absolute masterpiece in my opinion. And coming in at number 1 for most underrated, I actually have Super Dark Deception. I'm not a big fan of Dark Deception. I've made that very clear. I don't really like the game, and I actually don't think it's fun to play in the slightest. But making Dark Deception, but from a top-down view, makes the game so much more fun by default. Having a good view of the maze around you and the overall area makes it so much more interesting and enjoyable to navigate, and also, the pixel art in this game is so charming, so stunning, and so well done. This game has so much more content, so many cute and interesting little Easter eggs, and it's so much more fun to play with its top-down view and its charming little style. I really like this game. I like it a lot more than the base game or any other spin-off of Dark Deception, and it's actually one of my favorites of the year, weirdly enough. But now we actually have reached the categories where you guys got to decide who the winners/losers were. I asked you guys via a poll what the best and worst indie horror game of the year was, and we're going to start off by what you guys decided was the worst indie horror games of the year. These are the top 3 worst according to you guys, according to about 800 people from the audience. This is the worst list. Coming in at third, we have Zoocosis. Now, this is a game that I unfortunately did not have the time to play, but I am actually not surprised to see it here just because I think this one stems from mostly disappointment. I know the trailers of this game were incredibly high quality, and people had a lot of hope for this game. I personally never really did have hope because it's from the same developers as Sparky Marky, which is one of the worst horror games I have ever played in my life. So I wasn't expecting too much from it, but a lot of people were really excited for this one, and it just turned out to be a little bit boring and a little bit repetitive. I know a lot of people think the trailers were somewhat misleading after this game's release. But coming in second, according to you guys, is Circus of Tim Tim, and you guys are so goddamn real for this. Circus of Tim Tim is a game with purely purchased characters, which is so unbelievably lame. If a game has purchased assets, that's one thing, but for all of the characters to be purchased is just so boring. And speaking of boring, that is the best way to describe this game. This is a game in which all you do is walk around a big open wide area and collect 12 tickets. It is so lame, it is so boring, and it's so pointless. Like, the enemies never really attack you, and when you do get attacked, you actually have a limited amount of health instead of dying to one hit, so you can easily get hit a few times and then just keep walking around. It is so plain, it's so uninspired. Very much deserved to be voted onto this list. But you guys did end up voting number 1 worst of the year as Garten of Banban 7. And don't get me wrong, I understand that you guys see the name Garten of Banban and immediately cringe and want to die and pick it as the worst, but Garten of Banban 7 wasn't even that bad. It was kind of charming, it had some interesting ideas, it had some interesting, like, representation of other horror media. I don't get it. I think you guys only voted this one because Garten of Banban is in the title, and as much as I want to blame you guys for that, I can't really. But let's move away from the negative stuff. These are the games that you guys decided were the best of the year. These are the top 3 that got the most votes for the best indie horror game of the year as decided by you. At number 3, we have Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. Now, this game probably only reached the list because it is a Five Nights at Freddy's game, therefore it has some of the most, fans backing it, but I actually totally agree with this pick. Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit has such a beautiful style with such fantastic pixel art, and it's actually a pretty scary game. A lot of the scares are really effective, a lot of the atmosphere is really, palpable, and it's pretty fun to play. This is a very replayable Five Nights at Freddy's game. And at number 2, you guys went with Mouthwashing. This has very much been a fan favorite of the year. People have been absolutely obsessed with it, and I do understand why. Although I wouldn't necessarily rank it this high, I don't blame you guys for doing so whatsoever. It has a fantastic story, great charming visuals, and the characters are, like I said earlier, so grounded and realistic, making that story even more, disturbing to experience firsthand. Very valid pick so far, and you guys are just keeping up with the valid picks because our number 1 spot is Shipwrecked 64. What a fantastic piece of work with amazing ARG elements, some great scares, amazing authentic N64 recreation, and just so many layers, which is a pun, because Shipwrecked is divided into layers. I'm really tired. This video has been a lot of work. Yeah, Shipwrecked 64 is an absolute masterpiece. It's one of my favorites of all time, so the fact that it was the most voted by you guys, totally fair, and I fully agree. But with that, we get into my personal list. These are my picks for the worst indie horror games of the year. In third place for my worst list, I have Zoonomaly. I ended up picking a different zoo game from you guys. This game is very much style over substance, despite the fact that its style isn't actually that high quality compared to the creator's animations on TikTok. This game is painfully boring and repetitive. This game consists of 20 different puzzles that are all extremely similar and very dysfunctional. It's very easy to get stuck in a loop in this game, quite literally. If you get killed, sometimes you'll just keep getting killed over and over again, essentially causing a softlock. There's a teleportation system in this game that is essentially only used for exploiting and breaking the game, because otherwise it doesn't really come into play in the actual mechanics of the game. Yeah, this game is really unfun, painfully boring. I just had no... This was also a major disappointment, because I saw some potential in this game, and I think most people did, but it just fell flat in every single regard. And in second place for my worst list, I have a game called Mortissimum. This game is very slow-paced with a very clear lack of direction. There's very few clues or hints into pointing you into the correct direction, and it kind of just leaves you to yourself to try and just figure things out. The visuals are dreary and plain and lack any sort of creativity, and the mechanics, such as shooting, feel very clunky and dissatisfying. I think the best way to describe this game would be it feels very stiff and uncomfortable. I think there was some passion behind this game. I don't necessarily hate it or have like any kind of vendetta against it, but it was a game I found very boring and very plain. But the absolute worst of the year in my book handedly goes to Circus of Tim Tim. Every character and the map is purchased from another source for very cheap. This game literally had no personality or passion behind it from the get-go. The gameplay is repetitive and boring nonsense of just wandering around this big open location hoping you find what you need to find to get the hell out of it. The scares in this game are cheap and annoying. They are quite literally just jump scares that happen out of nowhere for no real reason. God, this game is frustrating, it's plain, it's boring, it has no personality. There's absolutely nothing redeeming about Circus of Tim Tim. But thankfully now I can talk about my best indie horror games. These are my top 3 of the year. I absolutely love these games, and I couldn't praise them enough. In third place, I have Kinetopet. This game completely changed what I understood to be possible from a video game. It is absolutely insane what this game manages to pull off. It does an incredible job at recreating the late 90s, early 2000s technology of a computer and kind of the weird gimmicks it had, like what this game directly parodies, like a Bonzi Buddy, or it also kind of reminds me of, say, Clippy. This game's aesthetic is so charming, and it's really creepy. The scares in this game are so effective, as I've said. They're just so shocking every single time. This game is a one-of-a-kind masterpiece that does everything that I think it needed to do in such a short and concise and perfect period of time. And my second pick for Best of the Year is Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. This game is just so fun to play, with such a cool variety in mechanics. I think the way they handled the grab pack in this game is the best they have so far. There are some very impressive scares and a very unsettling aesthetic. Just this game looks absolutely dreary and saddening, but in the best way possible. It's so creepy. And yeah, just so many sequences in this game are so fun, like with Mr. Light or the little nightmarish smiling critters. There's just so many terrifying sequences that are so fun to replay. And the additions to the Poppy Playtime story are so creepy and well written, and I love the way they're portrayed with like the tapes and the voice acting, and some of the music in this game really helps highlight some of those creepier aspects. I think this is a standout chapter for Poppy Playtime, and I genuinely really love it that much. But my number one, and this should come as no surprise, is Shipwreck 64. This game has such incredible ARG elements, with many websites and outside sources being worthy of exploring and sometimes absolutely necessary to try and crack certain puzzles. The recreation of the N64 style is authentic and beautiful with its visuals and aesthetic and sound design. The sound design of this game is terrifying and interesting and again authentic to the N64 era. And man, this game is scary. This game is so scary, and its mechanics and its scares just create this terrifying bubble of chaos and panic. The story and premise and Easter eggs and hidden details all throughout this game is just... there's really nothing like this game, man. Shipwreck 64 is such a beautiful, charming masterpiece that easily wins the title of my favorite indie horror game of 2024, as it is one of my favorites of all time. And now, with games out of the way, I would like to have a category dedicated to 3 particular studios/devs that really made a mark for themselves this year and did something genuinely incredible. In third place, I have Mega Cat Studios for Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. Because Mega Cat Studios was tasked with making a game for the longest-running, oldest, and most beloved series that indie horror has to offer. And they provided a game to said audience that blew expectations out of the water and became one of the most distinct and, honestly, greatest games in the entire franchise. And they've really embraced the community, even making like a Mega Cat Studios animatronic character. And I really hope they get the chance to do more. I would love for Mega Cat Studios to make a fetch game or something like that. It would be such a fantastic experience. So yeah, shout out to Mega Cat Studios for making such an incredible mark on the Five Nights at Freddy's community. Secondly, I have Unique Geese for Indigo Park. Unique Geese just really gave the community hope for what's to come of mascot horror by being such a passionate gamer on his own and then just taking up the challenge of making a mascot horror game and actually doing a pretty damn good job at it. He created such a kind and creative community that's so passionate for indie horror and just genuinely wants to see the genre thrive and succeed. Yeah, I just want to give a big shout out to Unique Geese because I think he created such a fantastic community with one game, and I know he plans on doing incredible things with the game in the future. But of course, for first place, I'm giving it to Squeaks DeCorge for Shipwreck 64. Squeaks completely changed what people thought indie/mascot horror was even capable of, and he created such an incredible indie horror game, one that genuinely does compare to the leagues of the best. And he did all of this basically single-handedly. He had very little help on this game. That's not to discredit the people that did help on the game, but he did a lot of this on his own, and he deserves all the credit he's been given for doing so in the first place. So that's technically the end of the awards, but I do have a category called Most Anticipated, where instead of 3, I have 6 upcoming indie horror games that I think are going to be pretty fantastic. Firstly, there's The Joy of Creation. Like I said earlier, I think this game is going to bring back some really cool scares and old school gameplay into the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, and the demo that came out this year was really cool, so I'm looking forward to this one. Bendy the Cage was postponed to next year, but seemingly it will still come out next year, and I think it's going to be something really special, and it's going to provide a little more horror to the Bendy franchise, which is honestly all I ever really wanted it to do. Same can be said for Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 coming in January. I think it's going to deliver a lot more scares and spooks to the Poppy Playtime series, and that's all I really want from it, because Chapter 3 was pretty much everything I already wanted, so if they can just elevate on top of that, this could be something really special. Hotel Investigation 09 is the upcoming sequel to Shipwreck 64, and it's going to be cool as hell. I have no doubt in my mind it's going to be able to live up to Shipwreck 64 because Squeaks is such a skilled creator, so that's something to really look forward to. Mother Hub is on the way. Once again, like I said earlier, it's an FPS survival horror kind of indie horror game, and it just looks so good, and it feels so fun to play. It just feels, all the controls and the mechanics feel so tight. I would love to get to more of this game, and I'm hoping to very, very soon. Also, I have a cameo in this game, so, you know, that's a big plus. But my most anticipated for next year is Don't Fret. I love the Don't Fret demo, and I love its style and concept oh so very much, so that is my most anticipated for next year. And with that, the Indie Horror Game Awards / the best and worst of indie horror for 2024 comes to a close. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It did take quite a bit of work to get it out around the holidays, so I hope you liked it. This will probably be the last time I ever do this, because in the new year, I plan on making this channel a lot more versatile than just being about indie horror. Don't get me wrong, I have a big passion for indie horror, and I'm still going to be talking about plenty of indie and mascot horror games. Like when FNAF has something going on, I'll probably talk about it. I'll review Poppy Chapter 4, I'll review a new Bendy game, I'll talk about every Ban game, because that's what I do. But I'm really only going to talk about the titles that specifically interest me, so when there's new niche titles that pop up, I am going to talk about them because I'm interested in them. Or when there's some controversies going on, I'm probably going to take a second to investigate them. But yeah, for the most part, this channel is going to become something very different in the new year, and I know you guys are going to love it. Please stick around, please show me some love and support for what I'm going to be working on in the new year, because it's going to be very different, it's going to be more authentic to myself, and I am very, very excited for it. So yeah, with that being said, thank you guys so much for the incredible year this year. I hope you guys had a good time watching my videos and tuning into my streams, and I'll be doing plenty of more of that in the new year, so be sure to follow me into the new year. And, yeah, thank you guys for everything. Have a happy new year. Hope you had a good holiday. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.